So it looks like after all, in this shit show of 2020, there could be a pleasant surprise around the corner. I don't expect it to stay this way, but take the W where you can. Anyway, hey everyone, welcome back to another multi-album review. This is the episode of the show that a week ago I probably didn't think I would be doing, but hey, surprise albums can be fun sometimes, right? Either way, as you guys can tell from the title, these are the two albums that I will be covering in this video. We have Logic's sixth and supposedly final studio album, No Pressure, as well as Taylor Swift's eighth studio album, Folklore. Both of these albums were pretty much surprise announced for the most part. Logic's record was announced just a week ago, and Taylor Swift's album was announced the day before it came out. Outside of their announcements, there wasn't too much promotion for them, so we just had to take them for what they were. But now they're here, and now it's time to talk about them. Once again, I'm blabbering on a bit while this picture is up so I could get a decent thumbnail. But regardless, let's jump right into the reviews because we've got some pleasant surprises this week. First off, I'm going to start by taking a look at Logic's album, No Pressure. You guys know Logic by now because I've talked about him very frequently on my blog and on this channel. I've reviewed both of his Bobby Tarantino mixtapes, his studio albums Everybody and Young Sinatra 4, all on my blog. And on this channel, I reviewed his last studio album, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. While I really enjoyed some of Logic's music when I first heard him, a bit more than most others in fact, it seems that as of recently, Logic was on a bit of a creative downturn. 2017's Everybody really started the point where many felt that his records were dipping in quality, and 2019 I would say was easily the lowest point for Logic creatively, as he released not one but two of the year's most critically panned albums, starting with his soundtrack album Supermarket, a tie-in with his New York Times best-selling novel of the same name. I didn't properly review that album, but it was a hideous blend of bland, forgettable alt-rock that didn't play to Logic's strengths whatsoever, and his move back to rap in the aforementioned Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, while very slightly better, was far more disappointing and pretty pitiful, with bland production, repetitive flows, some of Logic's worst lyricism to date, examples being that biracial penis line, or that I'm not bipolar but Kanye makes me wish I was line. And honestly, the biggest issue I had with the album was the everlasting feeling that Logic was just assassinating his own character. Previously, I saw him as a kind of nice everyman type of person, but on Confessions, it felt like Logic came across as something of an unlikable jackass, like when he bragged about how his suicide awareness song made him popular and earned him a lot of money. Something that popped up once again when he was featured on French Montana's Twisted, where he spat what many consider to be one of the worst, if not the absolute worst verse of 2019. Perhaps his worst verse ever, a set of bars so unbelievably bad that Joe Budden went as far as to call Logic the worst rapper to ever grace a microphone. Yikes. It seems though that Logic really took some time off after that, and he quietly was featured on Quinn 92's A Letter to My Younger Self, where it kind of sounded like he was listening to some of the criticism and really considering what a lot of people were saying about him. And now he's finally back with his sixth studio album and what is supposedly his final studio album, as he announced alongside this that he will be retiring from music to focus on his family, specifically his newborn son. Much respect on that front, though don't worry, he won't be out of the public eye too much, because he recently inked a deal with Twitch and will be a streamer for the platform. For those that watch Twitch streams and are interested, I will link his channel in the description. And honestly, I was interested to see if this album was as enjoyable as some of the projects that I liked from him, and if he really learned from the recent criticism that was being thrown at him. The album is 15 tracks and 59 minutes, which is a little longer in length, but not so much in the number of tracks compared to his last album. And honestly, this record really threw me for a surprise, because I think it is some of Logic's best work that I have heard to date. The title track, No Pressure, is a strong start to the album. Logic flows smoothly on a very relaxed beat with some great vocal interludes from Orson Welles and David Hayter, who plays Snake in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. This dude really got Snake on his album and actually fit it perfectly into the song. Hit My Line is also a potent track where Logic speaks to God about a lot of the troubles that he's witnessed in his life, and I think this is a track that shows me how much Logic's pen game has improved from his last album. Fitting to the title of the album, the song does have this relaxed vibe to it, as if Logic really has no more pressure on his shoulders, and that vibe continues to show on a lot of the songs here. For example, tracks like GP4 and Man I Is, where Logic flows so smoothly and raps a lot of introspective bars about his come up and life life in the world of fame. It's honestly great to hear that Logic's rhymes are far more concise and focused here, and it's also refreshing to hear that Logic shed that unlikable jackass persona that I mentioned was on his last album. With this, he really sounds like he's found a more clear frame of mind, and it's resulted in some of his best work. I mentioned that the album is pretty relaxed, but there are a few punchy tracks like Perfect and Five Hooks, but even on these tracks, Logic sounds so much better than before. He's not overflowing his verses with filler bars like he did on some of his last records, and he sounds like he's tastefully switching his flows without rapping way too fast like he did on a number of previous albums. No ID's production also helps Logic a lot on several tracks here, like Open Mic, Aquarius 3, Soul Food 2, and Dad Bod, as No ID's production gives him a perfect playground to flow more creatively than on previous records where it felt like he was just trying to rap as fast as he possibly could. I didn't expect to hear many features on here, but Salas does appear on Celebration and spits a compelling verse about his come up, and he also thanks Logic for helping him get to where he is today. His verse does add very well to what's already a very enjoyable song. Heard Him Say also has a sung chorus from Chris Thompson, and it's a beautiful hazy addition to the song that adds to the emotional feel of it. Also, it's a great thing to see that this album is very well paced in terms of its length. Yeah, there are some pretty short tracks, but even those feel really fulfilling, and there's no overly long 8 to 10 minute tracks like some of the ones on his past few records. It's nice that Logic is pacing himself better here and not going overboard in terms of the length of the tracks. Logic also drops a huge high point in the track Dark Place, where he showcases his vulnerability after all the criticism that he's faced, notably coming through with a hard-hitting line where he says that he's tired of searching for his name on Google only to find that he's worthless. It's one of Logic's most poignant songs, and it honestly feels like a bit of a gut punch. A to Z is also a very playful song where Logic spits his first verse in an almost alphabetical way, and then shows an old demo of his from 2005. It might seem goofy, but it's a track that shows Logic having fun, and it's definitely a late album banger. Also late into the album, Amen is a heartfelt tribute to the Rat Pack, Logic's fan group, with some beautiful pianos and vulnerable lyrics, and it's a very beautiful track that leads well into the closer to the album, Obediently Yours, which is a sample track with narration from Orson Welles about the case of Isaac Woodward Jr., a black man who was beaten and blinded by a white police officer. In the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think this song is the perfect place to end off the album, as it's a very telling and fantastic commentary on the fact that there is still work to be done in our world to combat systemic racism. And while it might be surprising to see that the final track on Logic's retirement album is a song that he is not on, I think the message here is so important that it makes the song a worthwhile finish. And while I'm not usually crazy about spoken word tracks, I think this one works so well, in part because the beat is so well produced and the way that Orson Welles is placed on top of it is just really fantastic. I can honestly say that Logic's going out on top because this final album is easily one of his best works, and it's about as good as you can get on a retirement album. Logic's production choices are very strong as No ID goes hard all throughout the album. His pen game has gotten so much better as well, and it's great hearing him flow more creatively and playfully on the album, instead of just trying to go super duper fast. And just as the title would suggest, Logic really sounds like he has no pressure on his shoulders. It's an album that almost sounds therapeutic for him, a closer to his career as a rapper but the start of something brand new as a person. Logic sounds way more relaxed here than ever, and I think that shows itself in the overall quality of the music. It's abundantly clear to me that Logic really listened to a lot of the criticisms that he's faced on previous albums, and I think with this project he really managed to turn lemons into lemonade. Much respect to Logic for making a big move and focusing on his family. Congratulations to him. And I'm so happy that he bounced back so strongly with this album. It's definitely something to be proud of. And I can legitimately say that Logic's No Pressure is gonna get an excellent from me. Logic, congratulations on a very successful rap career. You absolutely deserve to be proud of what you've done, especially on this album, and I wish you the best of luck in your Twitch streaming career. The surprises are not done though, because of course, now that we've talked about Logic's new album, now it is time to talk about the new Taylor Swift album, Folklore. As I mentioned, this is the 8th studio album from pop titan Taylor Swift, who I've of course talked about before on my blog and on this channel. I did a written review of 2017's Reputation and a video review of last year's Lover, and while I wasn't all that crazy about Reputation when I listened to it, I did very much enjoy Lover last year, and I thought it was a very good bounce back. It was an album that featured a few better pop tracks than before, but also one that leaned into Taylor's old sound a little bit more too. I can't say I was totally sure where where she would go from that album. As well, I definitely appreciate Taylor's music from afar. I'm not a hardcore Taylor Swift fan, so I haven't kept up with a lot of her moves. What I can honestly say is that I wasn't expecting a new record so soon after Lover. While Taylor Swift is a massive pop star that has maintained gigantic cultural relevance, she's never released 2 albums in back-to-back years. Generally, she takes a year off, or in the case of Reputation, 2. But if 2020 has taught me anything, it's that you really can't have any expectations whatsoever. And thus, here we are with Folklore. With COVID-19 running rampant, Taylor created this album in isolation, which props to her for being able to remain creative in times like this, because quite frankly, as an artist myself, that shit's fucking hard. Either way, she's now here with a 16-track, 63-minute album, a bit beefy for a pop record, but not entirely surprising given that it's relatively close in length to Lover. And with a lot of the positive early reception I was hearing, I was pretty excited to check this thing out. And while I'm not sure if it'll be for everyone, I must say this is probably my personal favorite Taylor Swift album to date. Going into the record, I was definitely expecting that this would be a more stripped down listen, and the intro track, The One, definitely showed me that. It was built mostly on some light pianos. I really enjoy that feel though, as the light, almost plucky feel of the song mixes well with Taylor's nostalgic reminiscing on the lyrics. Her vocals fit well with the minimal feel of the instrumental, and it's a compelling starter to the album. And pretty much the rest of the album continues with this sound, but the more sparse direction does fit Taylor very well. Tracks like My Tears Ricochet, Mirror Ball, Invisible String, and Peace eschew some of the popular vibes of Taylor's past few records, and are far lighter than much of what she's put out, but all the better for it, as they give Taylor a great playground to become vulnerable and deliver toned down yet still powerful vocals. I was consistently blown away by how cohesive and beautiful this collection of songs was. This doesn't sound like an artist chasing hits or making something just because the pop world said so. This is Taylor in fully focused top form, with tracks that are easy to get into and just as easy to fall in love with. I also thought Taylor's writing throughout this album was consistently interesting. Like on the track The Last Great American Dynasty, she connects herself to the story of Rebecca Harkness, the founder of the Harkness Foundation of Dance, who supposedly ruined the last great American dynasty, even though that was her husband's problem. And she does this to hit back at the sexist narrative that women deserve the blame for the problems of others. And then there's the track 7, where Taylor reflects back on a childhood friend who was once innocent but now deals with a number of problems at home, in what is one of the album's most touching and hard-hitting moments. There's also This Is Me Trying, where Taylor reflects on a past relationship where she accepts responsibility for issues that she's had, and the lyrics bear it all in regards to struggles with paranoia, alcohol, and the feeling of worthlessness in one of Taylor's most gut-punching moments in her discography. Taylor also tackles infidelity on the track Illicit Affairs in a way that feels nuanced, recognizing the high that it gives you but also the obvious pain that results from it, and what I'd say is an interesting exploration. Mad Woman is a track that makes some references to a lot of Taylor's past experiences with drama from people like Kanye West and Scooter Braun, but I really like how she takes these experiences and creates a good story around them, one that focuses on a cast-out widow taking revenge on the town that shunned her. Epiphany is a cut that tackles chaos and violence in the context of COVID-19, and while I've been critical of a number of songs that explicitly reference COVID, because I think a lot of the lyrics and punchlines most artists have used to describe it have been cheap and only serve to date the songs, Taylor doesn't fall into that trap here. She tackles COVID with more subtlety in a way that feels more focused and compelling. Kind of helps that it carries a bit of a double meaning, since it also touches on her grandfather's military experience. I think more musicians, specifically popular musicians, should look at a song like this and take notes if they want to talk about COVID in their songs, because this is definitely miles better than a lot of these artists who just happen to throw in a goofy punchline about quarantine in their songs. There's also a rare feature snuck in on here on the track Exile, which features Justin Vernon of Bon Iver, and it's easily one of the album's most memorable tracks to me. It's a very bare song where Taylor and Justin contrast each other nicely on the vocals. Taylor's more smooth singing nicely juxtaposes Justin's more rough vocals in a way that can kind of showcase the different sides of a relationship. Taylor does fit some storytelling into the album with a trio of songs described as the teenage love triangle. Each one is from the perspective of someone within the love triangle. Cardigan speaks from the perspective of Betty. August is said to be told from the perspective of someone that Betty's former flame James cheated on her with, and Betty is written from the perspective of James. While these tracks and their overarching story don't go back to back to back with each other, I do think they are very solid on the storytelling front, with some solidly layered lyricism that add to the already emotional feel of the track. tracks. And the album wraps up with Hoax, where Taylor dives deep into the feelings of a toxic relationship and her struggles to let go of it. Like much of what's here, it's a very minimal track where Taylor's vocals are more understated, but they once again fit for the mellow vibe of the song, and they close out the record wonderfully. Even for my initial excitement, I'm genuinely surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did. To me, it honestly feels like some of Taylor's best, most focused work yet. It's her least poppy, sure, but the trade-off for that is that it feels like Taylor's zeroed in on everything she wanted to do and put together a very cohesive, emotional work. I worried that the length of the album would be pushing it a bit, but each song really blew me away with their contagious soundscape, ethereal instrumentals, potent vocals, and layered writing. Taylor is at her best all throughout the album, and the result is a record that hits hard at every turn. Now, I will say this about the album. There is a chance some might not be all that crazy about it. As I mentioned, it's Taylor's least poppy album and her most downbeat one yet, and I can see some people being turned away by the fact that it's a bit over an hour. To me, I feel like Taylor doesn't waste any time with that hour, and the downbeat direction does allow her to showcase a lot of vulnerabilities. But if you're going into this expecting tracks like Shake It Off, Look What You Made Me Do, and Me, there's gonna be none of that. But regardless, I still highly recommend you check out this project, and I hope Taylor's fans do give it a chance because it's really some of her best stuff to date. I have no idea what her next move will be from here, but I'm glad this one was such a resounding success. So much so that I'm also going to give Taylor Swift's Folklore an excellent rating. 2 in 1 week. That feels good. And hey, I'll give them out if artists want to continue releasing great projects. Logic and Taylor really did great work with their albums, and therefore they both earned my highest recommendation. Way to go, Logic, and way to go, Taylor Swift. Great stuff. So yeah, that's this week. Big surprise. I didn't expect that I would love these albums as much as I did, but I really did, and I'm sure they will get plenty more replays from me in the future. Of course, though, that is just my opinion on these albums. What did you guys think about them? Have you listened to either of them, both of them, none of them? Do you plan to if you haven't already? And if you have, do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you indifferent towards them? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, no big deal. I won't pressure you guys into it. In terms of what's next, I'm not totally sure just because I don't know who's releasing soon or what their release schedules are. So naturally, I'm just kind of playing by ear and waiting for announcements to be made. Regardless, obviously you'll still see plenty of videos thanks to 10 years later and the fact that I have a new segment in gaming discussions, so there will definitely be new content, so stay tuned for it. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.